All right, let's get right into it. Today, we're digging into some really serious allegations against the Southern Poverty Law Center, the SPLC. The source material we're looking at tells a pretty wild and complex story. So let's unpack it. So the whole thing really boils down to this one pretty shocking question. Imagine this. What if a group that's famous for fighting hate was secretly paying for it to happen? Yeah, that question is really at the heart of everything we're about to look at. Okay, so let's just lay it out there. The main accusation, the core claim from our source, is that the Southern Poverty Law Center has allegedly been bankrolling the exact same extremist groups that it publicly and very loudly condemns. And get this, according to this source, this wasn't some kind of accident or mistake. The argument they're making is that the SPLC, on purpose, intentionally, created this whole hate crisis out of thin air. And why? Well, for its own gain, both financially and politically. So that begs the question, right? What would the motive even be? Our source has a name for it. They call it the hate grift. And this is really the core of the whole alleged scheme. The source argues that America has, believe it or not, a supply and demand problem for hate. The idea is that there isn't enough real hate to go around, so the SPLC had to, create it just to keep themselves relevant and justify their mission. To make this easier to understand, the source uses this really powerful analogy. They call it the Mafia Tactic. Think about it. It's kind of brilliant in a dark way. You control both sides. You're the one starting the fires, creating the hate incidents, and then you show up with a fire hose and ask for donations to put them out. You create the problem, then you sell the solution. Okay, so how would this actually work? The source breaks it down into a 4-step cycle. First, you secretly fund these extremist groups. Second, they go out and create the supply of hate incidents you need. Third, you step up to a microphone and publicly condemn the very hate you just funded. And finally, you cash in, fundraising off all the outrage that you helped engineer. Here's another way to think about it, another analogy the source uses. You know that antivirus software that's always popping up with scary warnings about fake viruses just to get you to renew your subscription? Well, the argument here is that the SPLC is doing the exact same thing, but with hate, manufacturing the threat to justify their funding. So this whole story, it's not just about one organization acting alone. According to our source, there are accusations of betrayal flying around, and some key players on different sides of this thing. The source literally asks, who are the traitors? And what they're getting at is the claim that some people inside the conservative movement were actually in on it. The allegation is they took money from the SPLC to promote these, as the source calls them, embarrassing and ridiculous figures on the right. And wow, they do not pull any punches here. The source uses this quote directly. We have to name names. Who in the conservative ecosystem is the traitor? Who are the Judases? I mean, calling people Judases, that's a serious call-out. It's a demand to identify who was supposedly part of this. So on one side, you have these alleged collaborators, but then the source points to a completely different group of people, the ones they say are innocent victims. These are folks who were unfairly slapped onto the SPLC's famous, or maybe infamous, hate map. And this isn't just vague talk. The source gives specific examples, naming names. You've got Turning Point USA, its founder Charlie Kirk, Dr. Ben Carson, and even the speaker from the source material, Benny Johnson. They're all listed as people who were, according to this, wrongly targeted. And just to paint a picture of how these individuals are seen by the source, listen to how they describe Dr. Ben Carson after he landed on that list. I cannot think of a more gentle spirit, prayerful person. The point they're making is clear, right? They're trying to show this massive gap between the actual person and the hateful extremist label he was given. All right, so the big question, where did all the money for this alleged operation come from? Well, as they say, you follow the money. And according to the source, that trail leads to some very well-known corporations and individuals. I mean, look at this list of alleged donors that the source points to. We're talking huge names. You've got tech titans like Tim Cook at Apple, Wall Street giants like JP Morgan, even big names from Hollywood like MGM and George and Amal Clooney, plus the well-known philanthropist George Soros. And just to show how far these claims have traveled, the source brings up a quote from Elon Musk. He said, "The left quickly realized the boogeyman of white supremacy disappeared, and so did their power, so they literally funded white supremacy." I mean, that is a heavy, heavy accusation.
So after laying out all of these accusations, what's the endgame? What's the solution being proposed? Well, the source doesn't just leave it there. It ends with a very direct call to action.
The conclusion here is pretty blunt. The source flat out calls the SPLC a grift and says that because of everything we've talked about, it needs to be shut down completely. And they have a specific 3-step plan for how to do it. First, you get its tax-exempt nonprofit status revoked. Second, you make it so people can't get a tax deduction for donating anymore. And the idea is that those first 2 moves will lead directly to step 3. The whole organization collapses financially. But then the source ends with this really surprising twist, a kind of optimistic take, believe it or not. The final point they make is that this whole mess is actually proof of what a wonderful of a nation America is. And the logic is, well, it's that real, genuine hate is so uncommon that it has to be faked on a massive scale just to seem like a problem. And so all of this really leaves us with a bigger question, one that's way bigger than just this one story. It's that age-old question. Who watches the watchdogs? How can we, the public, really make sure that the organizations meant to hold others accountable are accountable themselves? It's definitely something to think about.